Rommel's Rampage, Battle for North Africa, Spring 1941. Spring 1941. The North African desert appeared silent. But beneath that silence, a battle was taking shape, one that would influence the direction of the Second World War. Thousands of miles away in Europe, across the golden sands of Libya, tank engines were roaring. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of artillery could be heard. And in this very desert, a German general was about to become famous for his aggressive battlefield tactics. His name was Erwin Rommil. Later, the world would come to know him as the Desert Fox. But in the spring of 1941, Rommel was not yet a legend. He had simply arrived in North Africa on a mission that appeared limited in scope. But within only a few weeks, his forces would begin changing the entire balance of the front. This is the story of Rommel's Rampage, the Battle for North Africa, Spring 1941. A new player in the desert. By the end of 1940, the situation in North Africa had become increasingly difficult for Italy. Italian forces had advanced toward Egypt, but a British counterattack pushed them back. British forces captured several positions with surprising speed. The Italian army suffered heavy losses. For Germany, this situation was becoming dangerous. British positions in the Mediterranean were growing stronger. The British forces stationed in Egypt were not only protecting the Suez Canal, but also defending British interests across the Middle East. If North Africa fell completely into British hands, the situation could become even worse for the Axis powers. That was why Germany decided to send forces to support Italy. The force was known as Afrika Korps, and its command was given to an officer who had already earned a reputation for fast attacks and unexpected battlefield maneuvers. Erwin Rommil. Rommel arrives. In February 1941, Rommel arrived in North Africa. At first, he did not have a massive army under his command, but Rommel's strength was not simply in numbers. He viewed the battlefield differently. He believed that if the enemy was kept under constant pressure, if its communication lines were targeted, and if it was made to feel surrounded from every direction, even a relatively small force could force a larger army to retreat. But warfare in the desert was not easy. There were no forests, no mountain ranges covering every battlefield, only vast open desert, sand, heat, and hundreds of miles of open ground. Here, fuel was just as important as ammunition for the tanks, and water was perhaps the most valuable resource of all. One wrong decision could destroy an entire army. The Axis strikes suddenly. In March 1941, Rommel began organizing his forces. British commanders expected the Germans to first build up their strength and then launch a major offensive, but Rommel did not wait. He chose an aggressive approach. German and Italian units began moving forward. British positions came under increasing pressure. The army that only weeks earlier had been advancing successfully toward the west was now being forced to retreat eastward. This was one of the key elements of Rommel's battlefield strategy. He did not simply want to defeat the enemy, he wanted to force it to move. His tanks sometimes attacked from the front, and sometimes moved around through the open desert to strike the enemy's flank. For British units, one of the biggest problems was that they often did not know where the real German attack would come from. The war of speed in the desert, the North African campaign was becoming a war of speed. The army that could move faster could strike the enemy at its weakest point. Rommel wanted to turn this into his greatest advantage. German Panzer units continued moving across the desert. Clouds of dust rose into the air. Tank engines roared, and reconnaissance units searched for enemy positions. Rommel was often present on the battlefield himself. He studied maps, gathered information from his officers, and then suddenly decided which direction the attack should take. To him, the battlefield was not a simple straight line. The desert was a giant chessboard, and every tank, every supply truck, every artillery gun was a piece on that chessboard. But it was a dangerous game, because Rommel's army was also suffering from supply problems. Fuel and ammunition had to reach his forces from Europe across the Mediterranean, and keeping those supply lines operating was a constant challenge. The fortress of Tobruk. In the North African campaign of 1941, Tobruk had become a critical location. Located along the Mediterranean coast, the port was extremely important from both military and logistical perspectives. If Axis forces captured Tobruk, Rommel's advance could become much easier. But the Allied defenders inside Tobruk put up fierce resistance. German and Italian forces began putting pressure on the fortified defensive area. Artillery opened fire. Tanks moved forward. Aircraft roared through the sky. And once again, the desert filled with smoke and dust. Rommel knew that Tobruk would not be an easy target, but he was not prepared to retreat. He increased the pressure around the city, and Tobruk entered a prolonged siege. The balance of the war began to change. Rommel had achieved remarkable victories in North Africa, but now he faced an enemy sitting in a strong defensive position. The soldiers' war. On a map, the North African campaign might look like nothing more than arrows and lines, but on the ground it was a terrifying experience for the men fighting it. During the day, temperatures in the desert could become extreme. Sand entered everything. Tank engines suffered. Weapons malfunctioned. Water was limited. And when night arrived, the cold intensified. Soldiers fought throughout the day and then tried to rest near their vehicles at night. Exhausted, every soldier knew another attack could come at any moment, but no one knew exactly when. Sometimes the enemy was only a few kilometers away, and sometimes it suddenly appeared with the roar of artillery. This war was not fought only between German and British forces. Italian soldiers were also involved. So were different Allied units. Every soldier was fighting for his country, his unit, and the men beside him. Rommel's growing reputation. By the spring of 1941, Rommel's name was rapidly becoming famous across North Africa. His successes had made him a dangerous opponent for Allied commanders. But Rommel's victory was not complete. Tobruk still stood before him, and his supply lines remained under constant pressure. Allied naval and air forces in the Mediterranean were becoming a threat to Axis supply routes. The farther Rommel advanced, the longer his supply lines became. This created a dangerous contradiction. To win, he had to keep moving forward. But the farther he advanced, the harder it became to deliver fuel, ammunition, and food. Rommel was fast on the battlefield. But war is not won only on the battlefield. War is also won through logistics. And in North Africa, logistics was a silent enemy. A name becomes a legend. By the end of the spring of 1941, Rommel's name had become a powerful symbol on the North African front. His attacks had disrupted British plans. He had pushed Allied forces back across Cyrenaica, and he had placed Tobruk under siege. But this was not the end. The real test was still ahead, because in the months to come, the war in North Africa would become even more intense. Rommel now had to solve the problem of Tobruk, but an even bigger question stood before him. How far could he advance? And more importantly, could his supply lines keep up with his speed? In the desert, Rommel had already demonstrated that a smaller force could push back a stronger enemy through the right strategy. But every victory in war comes with a price. And in North Africa, that price was about to become clear. The Desert War continues. North Africa in 1941 was not simply a war. It was a war of speed and defense, a war of intelligence and deception, a war of tanks and artillery, and above all, a war of logistics. Rommel had built his reputation in the desert, but the man the world would later know as the Desert Fox still faced several dangerous turns ahead. Tobruk had not been completely conquered. British forces were reorganizing, and the next major battle was already taking shape across the desert. North Africa was only getting started, and when the next phase began, Rommel would face an enemy that did not simply want to defend, but was preparing to strike back. The Desert War had just begun,